Hi, my name is Warren Campbell, and I want to talk a little bit about my ethical evolution. I came from a family that are kind of, what you might call ethical vagabonds. They themselves, both my mother and my father, came from backgrounds of their parents being what you might call nominal or cultural Christians. And as soon as my parents were old enough, they fled the church. They didn't want anything to do with it. It wasn't a it wasn't a good experience for them. I think they saw no value to it. Saw it only as being a burden, which so many people still today in the church experience, unfortunately. So by the time they were parents of their parents themselves, um, they had completely, cut ties not only from the church, but they didn't want to have any of those associations or um, relationships in their own lives either. Um, so they didn't have those circles of friends. They didn't have really they were drawn towards people that were like themselves, who didn't want anything to do with the church and wanted to kind of in a individualistic relativistic sort of fashion define for themselves um, what was right and wrong, what was ethical, um, what wasn't. And unfortunately, this sort of shaky sort of ethical foundation that I grew up in really made for some very poor parenting, even if not outright abusive sort of parenting. Um, my father was not faithful. He wasn't faithful in his marriage. He either was open to or was engaging in sexual promiscuity. Um, he drank a lot. He was verbally and somewhat physically abusive. Um, he used illegal drugs. Um, and my mom, she didn't confront him. She went right along. Um, and even if she did see a lot of this being unhealthy, and she didn't make any moral judgments. She didn't make any. She allowed for it and followed if she didn't participate. Um, and since she was the one making all the money for the family and working full time and even overtime and working nights and weekends, she was absent a lot. And my dad, even when he was there, he was around a lot because he wasn't working a lot, and if he didn't have um, anywhere he could be, he had to be home, and he was just for the most part angry or emotionally absent. Um, so I grew up with very little sort of parental either guidance morally or ethically, or really supervision. Um, and this led to both me and my sister, being drawn to doing things that were illegal and immoral ourselves. Um, the relationships that I did make in school with kids that came from healthier environments, um, their parents didn't want them to be around. They didn't want them to be in our home. and I didn't understand it then, but it's clear to me now. I would feel the same way as a parent, absolutely. So, by the time me and my sister were in middle school, we, naturally kind of gravitated towards, the other kids that came from unhealthy environments, unhealthy homes. Those were the circles that my dad associated with. My mom really didn't have any friends growing up. So, my sister and I were, engaging in sexual activity and drug use, a variety of drugs. By the time we were in middle school, I was already, smoking cigarettes. I was that punk kid that just, wanted to do anything and everything to get a rise out of people and get some attention, I guess. Of course, it was exciting doing those things, stealing and destroying things. I had no direction. I had no outlet for my mind or my energy. So that's where it went. That's where I found my entertainment and my excitement in life, was to just do what was clearly wrong, what other people wouldn't dare to do. That's what I did. So by the time I was in high school, I was the way I kind of saw the world was that you just kind of figure it out as you go along. You don't need any solid systematic understanding of ethics or morality. So I didn't have any real guidance concerning that sort of thing, or any kind of solid ground to stand on. I was angry. I was an angry high school kid who had wants and desires for all sorts of material and physical things, and that's I if I was to say what my own moral sort of compass was, it would have been whatever I could however I could justify those ends. So some kind of relativistic utilitarianism, but I didn't really think it through. I just thought you have to kind of take it as it comes. I was vehemently anti-Christian. Because of the circles I gravitated towards, which were naturally, the rebellious kids that came from broken families. Many of them, who grew up going to church and hated it for the same reason my parents hated it, and saw Christians as being kind of brainwashed, simple-minded, hypocritical, just kind of foolish, religious zombies. So that's the way I talked. That's the way I spoke. That's the way I thought. That was my understanding of the world. So that's pretty much who I was in high school, and I was a punk kid that would quickly judge and rebuke authority. Anybody that would try to give me advice or direction, I was very hostile towards all of that. when I got a little bit older, my life experience, my interactions with people, my, you know, my understandings of the world kind of forced me to consider that maybe there had to be kind of a solid understanding of ideas about good and evil and justice. Like these things can just be kind of up for grabs or left to define for ourselves. It's kind of the world kind of this life sort of made necessary understandings of absolute truth that it can just leave up to kind of personal opinion, right? So I started thinking about this more and more, and I naturally kind of directed my. Well, I had to consider, I had to ask the question that if there are absolute truths that we're all subject to in life, then this, reality we call life isn't, it's not just a social contract. If there's an objective reality where things are actually true, if human life actually has value, and we don't get to define it for ourselves, then there must be something besides us, right? There must be God or something, that governs, that organizes, that that there's natural law, right, apart from what mankind determines. So, I had to ask the question whether, like, is there something else, or is reality, is life, is meaning only has value to the extent of if we give it value, from a human perspective. So at that point, I think at that point I became an agnostic. If I wasn't previously agnostic, I realized that the latter explanation that everything's pointless and that we give meaning to everything just seemed like absolute hubris to me, and the least likely of all possibilities. Based on my own experience, that's became immediately apparent to me. So at that point, I became agnostic and curious about what human responsibility is from that perspective.